Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads with my partner, my colleague, Mr. Sean Francis. I am Brian Altunian. Today, we have a special guest, somebody who we want to have on our podcast for quite some time. So glad that our schedules aligned. There are so many ways to describe our guest today. Attorney, mother, wife, sister, partner, entrepreneur. She's founded the Special Needs Network along with a number of companies. She's an incredibly successful businesswoman. You've probably seen her on CNN as a legal analyst, and just an all-around amazing person. You'll love the conversation as we bring Areva into our Just Two Dads family. So stay tuned for another episode of Just Two Dads. Hello, everybody. I am Brian Altuni along with Sean Francis. First of all, we want to thank you if you're catching us on Facebook Live. Welcome. Please leave your comments. We'll try to throw some comments up on the screen. We read them all. If you're catching us on our podcast outlets, please reach out to us if there's something of interest or a question you have or something that we've said that's intrigued or inspired or infuriated maybe. Send us an email at wearejusttwodads@gmail.com. You can catch our recording of this after the fact on our YouTube channel, Just Two Dads. And if you're down in the U.S. Virgin Islands, listening to us on WSTX AM radio, hello, family. We would love to hear from you as well. So without further ado, I'm excited to have this conversation. This is going to be inspirational because our guest is absolutely just an amazing figure here in not just here in Southern California where she's based, but really nationally and beyond. So very excited to have this conversation. Before we do that, I'm going to throw it over to Mr. Sean Francis to get us started. How you doing today, Sean? Feeling good?
People will probably doubt whether or not I really feel this way because I always say it, but it is as true as it is corny. I feel blessed and thankful, generally speaking, to one, be alive and have the platform that we do, but especially today, our guest is someone that we've known for a while. We've all got busy, crazy schedules, so we've been trying to do this. And she is a special needs warrior personified, a warrior generally speaking personified, as you mentioned, a legal analyst with CNN, a businesswoman, and the founder of the Special Needs Network. And that is none other than Areva Martin. Areva, welcome.
Hi, thank you guys for having me.
Oh, most definitely our pleasure. You probably think that you just do what you do, you are who you are, and you probably don't see yourself as a hero. I mean, I don't know. There's a chance that you might have set out to be one, but most heroes don't think they are heroes. And that's in part what makes them heroes. And all heroes have superpowers, and those powers come from, us, how and where we were raised. So let's start with a little bit of with that. People that are familiar with you know about where you are now somewhat, but where and what you come from that has made you who you are today. Why don't we start with that?
Yeah, I live in Los Angeles now, but I originally was born and raised in St. Louis. I spent time in Chicago. I spent time on the East Coast in Boston and even some time in New York. So I think of myself as a true Midwesterner, even though I, like I said, reside in California now. But I still have a lot of friends, have a lot of family in the Midwest. I frequent there often. And I think a lot of the values that are core or foundational to people who are raised in the middle of the country, I think once they're instilled in you, they follow you no matter where you go. So I love meeting other folks from the Midwest because we have a lot of shared experiences and, just ideology and principles.
Yeah, I didn't think that until I moved back out here because I'm originally from the U.S. Virgin Islands. I lived in Minneapolis for 10 years. I finished high school out here prior to that, moved back out here in like 96. And I meet people and be like, you're not from here, are you? Here being Los Angeles. And I wouldn't know what they meant. And as strange as you might think, especially for our listeners down in the Virgin Islands who are listening on WSDX, there is a connection to be said between the mindset or culture, if you will, of the Midwest and values, along with the Caribbean and what own up to it as being. It doesn't matter whether you're surrounded by a beautiful ocean or a couple buildings or farms. When you have a small community, there are pros and cons of that, and one of the pros of that is that people look out for each other and have a sense of community. So I think that that's what that is. But there's some people that aren't from there, from those areas, like Brian, that carry those values too. So it's nice to have those things in common. But so you grew up in St. Louis. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, St. Louis, as you said, it's probably the major city in Missouri. I'm sure it's the largest city in Missouri, but it's a city of communities, lots of small communities, people very family focused, a community where people still visited with their neighbors. You could go to your neighbor's house, you could knock on the door uninvited, a place where you could have a meal with your neighbor without a lot of fuss. Again, very different from LA. LA is such a car city where everybody has to drive every place. So it's not likely that you're going to be stopping by a neighbor's house because that neighbor may be literally, a 30-minute drive from you. So some of your closest friends in Los Angeles, because of how geographically spread out we are, the relationships are different. So I found growing up in St. Louis, people that you were related to or your close friends often lived in the same neighborhood. So you could walk to their homes and you could, spend time with them in a way that's different. I had to make the adjustment to LA where people don't visit regularly. And if they do, like I said, it's because they've been invited. There's a more formal invitation process. So there are some advantages, as you said, to living in a small town, but obviously places like St. Louis don't have 2 football teams. They don't have a professional basketball team. They don't have the kind of theater that you're going to get in a city like Los Angeles. Obviously, concerts and other things will come to St. Louis, but you're not going to get a lot of what people may think is the excitement that you get in a big city like Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because when you talk about that, that makes me think of the sense of community that I try to personally, and that Brian and I try to bring about. And it's funny because with technology, we almost have no excuse for not doing that. We're so strange as human beings. This whole idea of I look out for you, you look out for me, because we're all paying rent to have a room here on Earth. So that's very astute of you. Great observation there. Yeah, most definitely. So so tell us a little bit about, were you an only child? Did you have siblings? And about high school
I
and
have
college.
Definitely not an only child. Had several brothers that I grew up with, and lots of extended family in St. Louis, lots of cousins and other folks in what I call my village that were very important to my upbringing that I, again, am still in touch with. I have literally childhood friends that I grew up with that I'm friends with today. I went back to St. Louis mid-September. I was fortunate and blessed to get an award from the local Urban League in St. Louis, and it's their annual Women in Leadership Gala. They have 1,000, 1,500 people there, and even though it was this huge event, it felt like I was back in my small community because so many of the people I knew growing up or I'd known in high school or I even met after I moved away from St. Louis as I visit frequently. So I still have lots of ties. I mean, literally people I knew when I was in kindergarten, I'm still in contact with in St. Louis.
I know that.
The best part about a small town, right? It's still you still have those ties. Definitely.
Yeah. Did you have, so we obviously know without having gotten into the whole thing yet that you're a servant leader. Did you have family members that did that, generally speaking, or practice law? I mean, where did that come from in you? How did you get onto that path in terms of service?
No, I didn't have anyone that in my family growing up that was a lawyer or that I would say was had an official title as a leader. I think the way people think of leaders today, like either you're leading a nonprofit or you're leading, some kind of organization. But I grew up around people who were definitely givers, people who were giving to their communities and who were helping at the church. I grew up Catholic, so I was a part of a local parish. And my family and all the families in my neighborhood were very generous with their time and gave a lot to the church, always, donating items, doing the bake sales, doing the fish fries, doing all of those little fundraisers that churches have. So I definitely grew up in a community of givers, and being Catholic, that vow of poverty that nuns take and priests take, that whole concept of giving to others was pretty much embedded in my community and in my family. So I definitely grew up seeing people volunteering a lot of their time
Mhm.
to our organization, to our community, I'd say.
Gotcha. So,
And how did you?
go ahead,
Yeah,
Brian.
how did so your path to becoming an attorney and in focusing on the civil rights area? Can you talk about that a little bit? How did that come about for you? What was that inspired by?
Yeah, I think it was just as I got off to college and I started to meet people and started to, myself be more involved in organized, I'll call social movement type activities. I was very active in college in democratic politics, volunteering lots of my time for different Democratic candidates. So doing door knocking and canvassing and phone banking and helping to organize students on my campus for voter registration drives. So as I became more involved with what I'll call organized social justice issues, that really was somewhat of the part of the impetus for me to think about law and particularly civil rights as a career for me. Just that interest, not ever really interested in going into politics, but always was very much interested in electoral politics and being a part of the political process through, like I said, voter registration drives and organizing students and working directly for candidates and talking to voters and talking to constituents and helping people understand the importance of voting and the importance of exercising their right to vote. So I could say a lot of that happened for me in college.
Wow.
Good,
So
good. It would timely now as we
oh
get
yeah.
into, right.
Well, it would
Good
seem
question.
then, and we can get as personal as you do or don't want to, but it would seem that then, in your personal life, when you became a parent and you have a child that is diagnosed with autism, a parent is a natural advocate to begin with. So it seems like the combination of those two things made it very natural for you to take the path that you did. But again, not everyone becomes a warrior to the extent which you did have and continue to in the special needs realm. So tell us about, about that. Because on one hand, it makes sense and it's, yeah, sure, makes sense. But at the same time, it's not to be taken lightly.
Yeah, and I don't know if all parents, I think all parents have a natural instinct to protect their children and to do whatever they can. Most parents, I shouldn't say all, but the majority, I think,
Mm-hmm.
have an instinct to stand up for their children and to become, in some ways, their advocate. But I don't think that necessarily translates into being an advocate besides, that which you would
The
normally
minimum.
do for your own family. So
Correct.
I think I know I've met through my work with Special Needs Network thousands of really incredible parents, mothers and fathers, grandparents included, who have done great things in terms of helping their kids. And that's where it started and that's where it ended. They weren't interested in, doing that work or taking on responsibilities outside of that for their own child. In many cases, because it wasn't practical, work expectations, work responsibilities, other family members, sometimes illnesses, sometimes financial situations. So I think this work, everybody kind of comes to it differently, and lots of people find, where their space is, where they're going to be most comfortable in this journey.
Definitely. Definitely. So when you're, how old was your son when he was diagnosed?
My son was 2.
Okay. All right. And then at that point, were you practicing law, active and, were you at that point?
Yeah. So after I graduated from law school, I worked for about a year and a half or so with a Wall Street law firm that actually had a extension, an office here in Los Angeles. And I left that firm after about 12 to 18 months and I started my own law practice. So at the time of my son's diagnosis, I had already had 2 kids. I have 2 older daughters. And yes, I was a full-fledged trial attorney in my own practice, practicing law at the time I got my son's diagnosis.
How old is he now?
He's 20.
20.
He's 20. Okay. Wow. So
Okay.
you, like Brian, while Brian's daughter wasn't her diagnosis was not autism, you still have a diagnosis at a time. We always say the further back you go in the years with regard to our diagnosis, the more of a warrior and advocate one has to be because there's less awareness, there's less resources, and there's more mountains to climb. So kind of twofold. You had the vision to, because you're in a situation where you mentioned in a law firm, a Wall Street law firm with an extension, an office out here in Los Angeles. That's something that might be very a level of satisfaction for the average person. But you're looking at, no, I want more. I want to create. Tell us about that, if you can. Just what caused you to step out from an area that most people would be comfortable remaining in, to create something for yourself and others?
Well, I always wanted to get involved in civil rights litigation, and the firm that I was in was what we'd call like a corporate law firm. So they represented mostly major corporations, and they just didn't have a practice area that was going to ultimately be where I wanted my career to go. So at the time, it was a good job to start my career. But I quickly realized that I really wanted to pursue different practice areas that were not available at this law firm. So it was really just a decision of trying to, match what I wanted to do with my career with a place where I could do it. And that firm, even though it was great, I made a lot of good connections and some folks that I'm still friends with today that work there. It just wasn't the right match for me, given what I wanted to do with my legal career.
Yeah, yeah.
And then moving into
to
the special needs network. We talk about that because that's now actually, you can share with us, is how long has it been? Is it 16 years? Is it 18 years? How long?
Yeah, it's going on 18 years.
Wow.
I started that, shortly after my son was diagnosed. It was apparent to me that there was a need for a parent-centered and parent-focused organization in Los Angeles that would really center the needs of underserved and under-resourced families, particularly those in minoritized populations. So I started the Special Needs Network primarily as a parent support group, was the first kind of focus. Then we moved into a lot of policy advocacy work. And
that seems a natural progression with your background. Yeah.
Progression of our work. And now that we progressed, still doing our parent support, still doing our policy advocacy work, but have added on to that or expanded into direct services. So now we are, I think of us as a full service nonprofit organization because we have direct services, we have policy advocacy, and we still place a tremendous focus on being a parent network, a supportive network for other families.
Mm-hmm. And we try to have, we want to be uplifting here, and we also want to, and we're big in the areas of personal development that plays a role in the financial services business that Brian and I do and have as well. And so for the person that's sitting, the parent, let's say I'm envisioning the single mom that's at home thinking, look, I'm trying to get through today. I know I need to worry about tomorrow, but I can't even do that, whether it comes to, financial products and services and education for herself or starting a business of her own. And so tell us, if you will, because even before we met, which is before today, but even seeing you on CNN and, over the years and everything, you always appear and have an aura of someone who would not know what fear is if they saw it. Now I know because you're human, that can't be true, but it never shows. So tell us if you...
Sean, definitely not true. I think everybody, obviously, if you're human, you experience pain and you definitely experience fear. But I hear what you're saying about that mom or dad that's at home feeling overwhelmed and doesn't know, how they're going to make it, may have bills that are unpaid, may be facing some setback on their job because obviously with COVID, so many things have changed in the workplace for so many parents. It can be daunting. And that's one of the reasons we started Special Needs Network. And we don't just focus on the child or young adult or person that has disabilities. We focus on the entire family because we know that the family has to be healthy in order to provide the kind of support that an individual with special needs requires. So we have a tremendous number of community-based services, and we have an outreach coordinator, a person whose full-time job in our organization is just to take calls from like that single mom and connect them to resources. Maybe it's food insecurity. So we have relationships with food banks and other sources for food. And many of the programs that we do in the community, we come with a big, almost like a farmer's market type setup where families can literally go home with bags and bags of groceries.
That's
Maybe
fantastic.
mom is facing, homelessness. Maybe they're unhoused, or that's an issue that's going to come up for them. And we, again, work with many of the housing agencies in the county, in the Tri-County area, and we've helped many families get into transitional housing, get shelter housing, get vouchers for hotels. So we have access to those kinds of resources, and we are plugged in to those kinds of resources. So we would hope that that single mom that's out there, or dad that may be feeling overwhelmed, hopefully they find our number, they find who we are, they've heard about us, they've seen something, or maybe even just in a Google search that they could, make their way to us, because we have the ability to help them. And sometimes we've even been able to give cash. During COVID, we were giving actual Visa cards we had a grant from a foundation, and we were able to give out, cash cards to families that they could use for, whatever their needs were. So we are in the community, boots on the ground, providing, like I said, just a complement of services, from food to resources around housing and jobs, job training opportunities. So we really hope that that mom that you just described gets connected.
Yeah.
So two things I just thought of. We've been honored to be a part of the
farmers market. The farmers market is what she called it.
The farmers market. The transformation. I can't think of the event. What is the name of the event, Areva? I'm sorry.
A Special Needs Network event?
Yes, Transformation, the annual event.
Transformation, annual.
Right, the Tools for Transformation, right. So we've been able to be a part of that, and had a booth offering, financial services and things of that sort. And I've never thought of this before, but two things. One, are the services then limited to, you mentioned 3 counties, so we're in the Los Angeles area primarily, not nationally, correct?
Well, those kinds of services where we're providing food, yes, are in the Tri-County area. But if you go to our website, we have a ton of services that are offered nationally.
Excellent. Great. Good. That's the first question. The next one is
somebody just asked that question on a comment. So perfect.
Yeah,
good.
There are lots of services that are available on our website at snnla.org. So if you're in Boston, if you're in Florida, if you're in Chicago, you can definitely access some of those services.
Good. So then here's the next question. For someone that's hearing this and their sense of purpose might not be to go start a venture of their own, but they want to give, I'm assuming there are volunteer opportunities available as well.
Yes, there are lots of opportunities. There's donation opportunities. Obviously, nonprofits work because of the generous donation of sponsors and donors, people who believe in the work and who support the work through financial donations. So on our website, snnla.org, there's a donate button where people can go, and it could be a $5 donation or a $500,000 donation. All of it helps us work towards the mission of serving hundreds of thousands of families who have children with special needs. And then, as you said, there are volunteer opportunities for people who are in the Los Angeles community. You will find on our website various events that we sponsor throughout the year where people can come out. We were just at the Taste of Soul, the big street festival that's given in South LA on Crenshaw. We were there a couple of weeks ago, and we had some of our staff out, but we also had volunteers who were with our staff, and they were there to help raise awareness, talk to families, tell them about the network. And those are the kinds of events where we will often be, because that's where people are. So we go where people are because we want to meet people where they are.
Excellent. Fantastic.
Makes perfect sense. I was going to ask a question, just, and you may not know the answer. We think, because Sean and I are also both in the Los Angeles area, that California is incredibly progressive when it comes to policies and support of the special needs community. First of all, is that true? And second of all, is California really is it leading the path as far as, instilling or encouraging or supporting policies in other states? I don't even know if that, how do you feel about kind of where we are in California?
California definitely has some policies, or they've passed some laws like the Lanterman Act, which sets up the regional center system, which provides services for individuals who meet their eligibility requirements, which provides them with a complement of services from the time they're deemed eligible until death. That's unique in some ways to California. Other states have some systems that are similar to that, but not exactly the same. California, I would say, is in the top 10, 15 states that provide access to services for individuals with disabilities in a way that most families find to be, more accessible than other states. I've talked to folks in Massachusetts. Massachusetts also has a very good network of support and lots of services that are provided. I've talked to folks who've moved here from Texas and Georgia and some southern states who have said the services are much better in California than those southern states. But with that being said, California has a huge problem, and it's a disparity problem. And California has for the last several decades, and it's the issue that we've been working on. I've been working on since my own son's diagnosis, continues to disproportionately spend through its California Regional Center systems more on children, white children, than they do on children of color. There continues to be huge issues of access for children of color, and particularly foster care children suffer a great deal in our California system. So, California, I think, has done a lot for the disabled community, or the disability community, but there's a lot more. And when people think about disabilities, I know that some of the work we've been doing is trying to get people to think about disability rights in the context of social justice and social justice issues. And we work at that intersection because for years, the disability community was siloed from the social justice community. And because of that, I think we have suffered. People have not thought of that intersectionality of individuals who might be from a disenfranchised community, maybe African American or Latinx, and be disabled, and what that means to be living at that intersection. So I think there's a lot more work to be done in terms of what it means to be autistic and to be a Black male autistic person living in an under-resourced community that doesn't have high-quality medical care, that doesn't have clean drinking water, that has limited affordable housing. How much more difficult it is for that individual to gain independence, to find suitable employment. And we know people with disabilities continue to be disproportionately impoverished. The poverty rate for people is appalling in this country and even in this state. So go California, but not really.
But and I'm glad you said it, because actually that's our feeling that way. We feel exactly the same way as parents, that we've made a lot of progress, and yet there's still a lot of communities that are completely under.
And you have to ask questions. And here's the thing. So I'm obviously, for those that are looking, I'm obviously an African-American man. My wife is from Los Angeles. She's Latina. And we have had access to virtually all the services that we may want and need. Now, we are aware that even the services that are free of charge, that the regional centers provide, there's a host of services that are there free of charge, but you don't get them if you don't ask for them. And you don't ask if you don't know. So there's knowledge that needs to get out. But because of the manner in which we've been fortunate, and I've seen very little, if any, challenges from a racial standpoint, I took for granted what was there. And I was actually going to ask you what some of those differences are, because, it was brought to my attention by an account on Instagram, quite frankly, that was focused on just those things. And I think what people forget is that when a community is marginalized and disenfranchised because of a diagnosis, gender, race, skin color, whatever the case may be, it all boils down to the same thing. And what is your thought on, from a solution standpoint? And this is a big question because it's almost like fighting City Hall. I don't know if there's one answer, but what is your thought about a solution with regard to the manner in which the disproportionate spending takes place? Is that about a policy, a procedure, different candidates, all of the above?
Well, you're right. It's a complex web that has been woven, and to detangle it is also, it's a layered process. There's not a single thing that we can point to say that this, if we wave our wand, that we can magically, undo what has been decades, if not, centuries of systemic racism that we've been talking about since the murder of George Floyd. And our systems that serve disabled people are not immune to those same systemic, entrenched systemic barriers. And I think what we saw over the last week and a half with that leaked audio tape from our Los Angeles City Council members is that there is an anti-Blackness sentiment that is embedded even in what should be some of our most liberal institutions, like our democratic Los Angeles City Council. And that same anti-Blackness sentiment is embedded in most of the institutions in our state. So the first thing we have to do is be willing to acknowledge it. And there's been, I think, a certain degree of hesitation, a certain degree of timidity around just even acknowledging that exists, which we are now in LA even, being forced to grapple with, because we have in Los Angeles, I think in particular, become comfortable with this notion of people of color and thinking that there was some monolithic group called people of color that included African Americans and Latinos and Asian Americans, and that we were all in the same boat rowing in the same direction. And
right.
What that weak tape revealed is no, there's some people in that boat who want to push others out into the river and drown them, right? So they don't want them in the boat. They don't want them on the water to begin with. So we have to come to grips with that, and we have to take the blinders off, and we can't be so naive as to think that every person that is Latinx in this country, identifies with being a minority. We know that many racially ethnic groups, proximity to whiteness is far more important to them. And unfortunately, we have a long history in this country from groups like the Italians to the Germans coming to this country and deciding that the way to become white is to be anti-Black. So, I mean, it's very deep. It's historical. And it's something that I think we've not been willing to deal with. So back to DDS and how we treat the disabled in this state. We got to start there. It's very fixable. We know the problem. If you go back to, I've been talking about this. It's a huge expose in the LA Times. Maybe it's 2006 or so. I don't remember the exact time, but there was a huge study done. And this disparity, the spending on white kids in the Department of Developmental Services, geographic region, kids in Orange County, kids by certain zip codes. So we've known about this for years. And Brian Capra, who's a lawyer with public counsel, just did a report that he issued and said that the needle has not moved very much in terms of disparities at the regional centers level in years. So I like to think that we have smart elected officials. We have elected officials who care. We have smart people that run these agencies. So what is the reason that we continue to see these disparities? And I don't think there's anything you can point to other than some systemic, anti-Blackness, systemic anti-minority bent that has continued to be pervasive, even with those folks who consider themselves well-intentioned and well-meaning.
I'm glad you said that. We never, outside of speaking, I don't know, ill of someone or being disrespectful or whatever, we've never had a list of things that we just figure, we're not going to touch. But on this show, we tend to be uplifting. We talk about difficult topics here and there, but we've never gone to the difficult route as much as we are here today. And the fact that I'm feeling what I feel, wonderful and fresh discomfort from it, because what happens is, you just answered, it's not one thing. When we have a history of operating a certain way, I've always said that America is like a family who at a dinner table won't speak about certain subjects. And when a family doesn't address certain subjects, that problem just persists. And that feeling that we're having even talking, and I know that some listeners are going to have it too. That discomfort you feel is just a sign that it needs to be. The discussion needs to be had. And the bottom line is, whether it's where you live, what you earn, your gender, your skin color, a diagnosis, whatever the case is, as long as you're misrepresented or not represented, there's a tendency for you to fall behind. And if you happen to be a person that has several things going for you or not going for you with regard to, the areas I just mentioned, that's it's natural for that to take place. And these are conversations that we have to have. So I deeply appreciate that.
Yeah, we can have a more cheerful, uplifting conversation.
No,
I
like this.
Switch
yeah,
gears.
this is good.
This is not gonna be uplifting. This is gonna be depressing. It's gonna be pathetic. And so this is not going to get you uplifting, because it's not. And if I gave
But it has to happen.
more stats about this, it would even depress you more. So we should talk about something happening.
But here's the thing.
Listen, I'm just gonna say, like, I like having this conversation, because if you're not in that particular community, you may have an awareness, but you don't really have an awareness. Like, you don't really know. You don't know until you know, right? Like, like I said.
No,
I
you're
said
right.
the same thing.
Something Sean said. Sean said, his wife, he said you haven't had any problems, and you said that you won't get services if you don't ask for them. That's kind of a oversimplification, and you meant it well, because that's been your experience, but that is not the experience of the typical Black single mom, Black married mom, the Latina mom.
Absolutely.
Many of the regional centers throughout this state, they will ask, but the answer is
and still get told no. And that's what and that's another thing too. Look for something to be thankful for, and then take action. Because I say that when I speak with people that are like, well, that hasn't been my experience. We didn't get this, we didn't get that. And when they tell me about the stuff that they deal with, and here's the truth. I know that there's I believe to an extent we get back what we put out. Okay, sure. But the other thing is, there's a big crapshoot that takes place, because when you pick up the phone and call these places, right, you don't know who's going to answer the phone. And you may get someone who is a warrior in action and not just name, and they're going to go to bat for you no matter who you are. And then you got people that are going to let you know that they're underworked and underpaid based on their actions. None of that makes it okay, and it really is a crapshoot. And I think that goes to one thing that we talk about, which Brian says a lot, is like, when you talk about love and empathy, you got to empathize, because just because your shoes fit good, that doesn't mean that everybody else on the planet has a pair that fits well, because that's not the case.
Yeah. Again, I was going to say, it's interesting, because there's always this discussion, the perspective, not to get political, but other states in the country all look at California and think, oh, California is so progressive. California is such a liberal state. And while we've, again, made progress in certain areas, this is the same problems in this state as we do in other parts of the country. There are communities that are not only underserved, but they're attacked, they're pigeonholed, they're set aside. We need to have these conversations. Again, I'm never afraid of having. Sean and I have had these conversations for several years, because they are.
Look outside our door, Brian. There are 50,000 people sleeping on the streets of Los Angeles. 30 to 40% of them are Black. So we don't really have to look too far to get evidence
Agreed.
of the gulf in this city, in particular, a city like Los Angeles, where you can drive from one end of Wilshire Boulevard and literally see people living in tents in the most, despicable conditions you can imagine, and then drive to the other end of Wilshire Boulevard and see literally homes. I would say 50 million, but some are $200 million. I mean, so the rich in this town, the ultra rich, versus the poor, it's really
huge disparity.
Yeah, the disparity is
huge.
And getting larger. I mean, they're talking about lifting the rent moratoriums, and I know it's a huge issue I have a lot of friends who are mom and pop landlords who've been decimated by the moratoriums, but they're predicting maybe 50,000 more people end up on the streets when that rent moratorium is lifted in early 2023. So We have a lot of issues. If we want to call ourselves the leader, if we want the country to follow where California goes, we got $90 billion surplus at the state level. I would think that, again, I go back to my anti-Blackness, and what we got a good history lesson in listening to that leaked tape is, many people are questioning, have we not fixed the homeless issue because the people who are in charge of fixing it to a certain extent favored, policies that did not benefit Black people who they feel were unworthy of those benefits. So there are a lot of questions. And when you talk to experts, and I'm no housing expert, but I've talked to a lot of them, they'll tell you that the problem with housing in America is race. It's not money. It's not buildings. It's none of that. It's race. It's the will. It's the political will to fix the problem. And if it doesn't impact the people in power, then oftentimes in our country, those problems.
And that's a lack of empathy. That's that's not my problem. That doesn't affect me. Yeah, but like we always, it's been said, injustice towards one person is injustice towards everyone. And if you look at that's like we say with the special needs community alone, outside of race, if you're blessed with a long life, you're going to become a member of the special needs community. So if you hear us talk about our children and diagnosis and things like that, and that's just not you, whether it's because because of age, because of an injury, because of a family member, or because of an actual diagnosis and a health situation, you live long enough, you're going to be a member of our community.
Yeah, that's a great point. I am going to tell you something happy, because I don't want to end the interview without something happy. So we have this incredible event coming up on November 17th. It's our 16th annual Evening Under the Stars Gala. We are super happy about this event. Lots of changes. We changed our producer of the event, so it's going to look different. It's going to feel differently. We moved the location. We're at this cool new spot called the Beehive that's on Central Avenue. It's the first Opportunity Zone commercial project that's been built in Los Angeles. And it's a combination of office space and commercial warehouse space, but they have this great outdoor event space. And it's right on Central Avenue. So if you are either from Los Angeles or the history of Los Angeles, Central Avenue was the corridor that was home to some of the greatest jazz artists and jazz musicians in this country.
That's right.
So Duke Ellington and all of those jazz greats would come to Central Avenue, and there were nightclubs up and down the boulevard where they would play. So we are...
it was the West Coast answer to the Harlem Renaissance, so to speak, was it not?
In many ways, it absolutely is. And it all happened right on Central Avenue. So we're paying tribute to the past while we are honoring I guess we're honoring our past as we are celebrating our future. So we're honoring what Central Avenue used to be. We have a whole lineup of great jazz music, from doo-wop bands to bebop jazz artists to strolling violinists and just the best jazz that you can think of in this town. Because we're going to be celebrating what will be the opening of the first ever comprehensive autism and developmental center that's on the campus of MLK. So it's right at 120th in Wilmington. It's been a long time in the making. We've been talking about it for many years now. We've had several delays with the building because of COVID and just some other, project delays related to construction. But I was just over at the center a couple of weeks ago, and it is near completion. And we're on the second floor of this 3-story children's wellness center. The first floor is going to be all the county of Los Angeles. So all the foster care kids in our county can come to this first floor where they can get evaluation, get medical care. And then we'll be on the second floor offering everything from pediatric services to dental services through our partner, St. John's.
Excellent.
To all the developmental services. We're going to have a big OT gym. We're going to have a music studio, a life skills kitchen. So our young people can come.
When is that actually going to, when is that facility? We know when the event is coming up, just because we've got the link on the screen there for those that are actually looking. But when is the facility going to be open?
Yeah, we're hoping grand opening in either late December or early January. Right now, they're finishing some final touches on the building and then building the parking lot. So
excellent.
As quickly as they can get that parking lot open so people will have some place to park. But it's going to be a game changer for kids who've had to go out of their community to get evaluation, We'll be offering speech therapy, occupational therapy, music therapy, educational therapy, all of those services that when my son,
Oh,
a lot of those services, I had to drive to Ventura Boulevard, I had to drive to the Valley because there weren't a lot of
mhm.
providers in my Los Angeles community. And I live
Yeah,
in mid city, so there are even fewer in South LA, which is where this clinic will be. So, and we're next door to Charles R. Drew University, which just announced that it's going to accept its first full medical student class. So they will be now a full-fledged, independently accredited medical school. So we're looking to partner with the university to do some great genetics research, other
excellent.
research. So really using those docs that want to get exposed to public health, want to get exposed to behavior health. We'll be able to do some training in our clinic. We'll be able to write some great research papers. So it's just going to open up the opportunity for us to really create a national model of how to deliver services to under-resourced and underserved communities with competent, culturally competent and culturally centered providers.
Send,
That's what
it.
and
we're
that's
excited
huge.
about.
And I want to encourage everybody. We usually talk about this a little closer to the end, even though we're getting towards the point where we wrap up. Is just to remain curious. I mentioned, my family, we're a large blended family. My wife and I became legal guardians to my sister-in-law's 4 kids about 11 years ago, completed the adoption process about 3 years ago. And so there was a period there where we had monthly, I don't know if it's monthly or weekly visits from a social worker, and they all went fairly smooth. And it just dawned on me one day as she's sitting down, I was like, okay, we're not perfect by any means, but our visits were fairly uneventful. And I just got to think, I said, not all the visits go like this, do they? She was like, well, no. And then when I had to go to children's court, just to simply, for a hearing, because my wife had done that for the most part, and I just saw that environment and saw the families and the energy that's in that room. When you talk about an underserved community, generally speaking, children in foster care meet that definition, I mean, tenfold. Now, if you add to that, you add to that a special needs component. And under this roof, I say this because I do the show from home. Under this roof, I'm familiar with every last one of those. There's a lot to be said there. We just have to remain curious about each other, ask a lot more questions, and make a whole lot less statements.
Yeah, I'm glad you had that experience, Sean. I used to work out of that court. I was a court-appointed lawyer, and I would take on cases from that children's court for kids who needed representation in IEPs and other matters. And having been in that court many times, yeah, it's a sobering experience to see kids who have been ripped away from their families, kids, mothers and fathers fighting, trying to meet the criteria to get their kids back. Maybe they've got to get sober. Maybe they've got to get a job, or they've got to, get permanent
counseling,
housing.
whatever. Yeah. And you know what's funny? I'm more spiritual than I am religious, right? So, but that's the only place I've ever been where I could literally feel energy and aura, like it was like touching me, like something not good. And so you're right. But we are at that point.
Sean, congratulations. I didn't know that you and your wife were adoptive parents. I know that you had adopted 4 of your, I assume, are they Latinx? Are they Black? What are these kids?
They're Latinx. Yes.
Yeah. That the Latinx and Black kids are the majority of the kids in foster care across the country and definitely in our state. And they have a very difficult time getting adopted out of the system. So
yeah.
You and your wife for taking that on. Yeah. That's not an easy thing. Did you have your own biological kids?
Yeah, we have my wife's daughters from her previous marriage, and then we have our nieces and nephews who we adopted, and then our only biological child is my son Elijah. He's 16. He was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3, and it's funny how things come together. I think he would be verbal anyway, but I don't know that he would be where he is in that regard had his cousins not come to live with us.
Are
So
any of the 4 kids, are they on the spectrum or?
no, none of them have been formally diagnosed with being on the spectrum.
So just your son,
no.
the 16-year-old. Okay.
Yeah.
You got a full house. You had 6 kids.
Yeah. 7 actually. 7.
7.
It's six that live at home, but 7 total. Yeah, I always say I have reasons where I could.
You adopted 4. Your wife had 1, and you had 1.
No, she had 2. She had 2.
She had 2. Okay.
Yeah.
How old is she?
She is 30.
Okay. All right. You got the grown folks and babies.
Oh yeah, all the way through. Look, I always tell people, I said, like, I got several reasons. If I didn't like my last name as much as I do, and need to continue to pay homage to those that came before me, I have justifiable reasons to change my last name to Jackson, Walton, or Osmond, but I'm not going to.
What's the youngest kid? How old?
16.
Oh, okay. So 30 to 16. Okay. So most of them are almost out the house. A lot of teenagers.
Yeah, a lot of teenagers. Yeah, and everybody pitches in and helps. It continues to be a great ride, but it's also served me with the whole empathy situation, because when you do what you do, that's why in the beginning I was telling you don't see yourself as a hero. You just do what you do. Your perspective is here, and that can be good in terms of trying to get a path. Go from point A to point B, but you got to look up and look around to appreciate what you have, and then attain empathy for other people. Because, I always say our biggest nightmares, the biggest ones we have, are somebody else's dreams. That which you went to bed probably crying about tonight, somebody's going to bed begging and praying for it. So you just never know. We have to look out for each other. Service to each other is the rent we pay for our room on earth.
Great. I got to get Brian. Brian, you only have the one daughter, right? So
I actually have 3 kids. I have 2 daughters and my 15-year-old son too.
Okay, I didn't know that. How old are your kids?
My oldest is going to be 27 in a couple of weeks, and she's the one that was diagnosed with just learning disabilities. And I have a 23-year-old and my 15-year-old son too.
Oh, okay, you got a teenager too, so you guys have that in common. You have some teens together.
We do.
Yes.
How's your daughter, 27-year-old? Is she independent? Is she functioning? Is she?
Well, and that's what's always the great. So she's always a great story because of the diagnosis, the date of diagnosis. We were told all the things that she wouldn't do, couldn't do, what we should expect. She not only is living independently, she lives in upstate New York. She's a teacher now, a substitute teacher at school. Actually, she's transitioning to become a full-time teacher. She's married, has a stepson. Yeah. She's living independently. She's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's a good story.
You're a granddad.
I've never publicly acknowledged that.
Well, that means you're grand at being a dad.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Glad to hear that about your daughter. That's so wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah.
That just goes to show what how capable kids are, who oftentimes are labeled. We honored a young woman at our 2 galas. One is the fall one coming up, but we do one in the spring, mainly focused on women. And we honored a young woman who, when her mom, she doesn't have autism, she has a combination of learning disorders and some other things. And her mother was told she was like a hopeless child, kicked out of every school and was never going to really learn. And this young lady now is in college, and she's kind of a micro entrepreneur, and she's doing so well. And at our coming gala, we're going to honor 2 brothers, November 17th, 2 brothers on the spectrum. One of them has 2 degrees from Loyola. He graduated with the dual degrees. And while on campus, living independently, he started a support group for autism. He brought speakers in. He hosted panels. He was the most amazing self-advocate. And his younger brother, also on the spectrum, is now in college, hasn't yet completed his degree. And they now, this is, you won't believe this. I was their lawyer. I represented them as kids, getting them out of public school and getting them into a non-public school. And then I just became friends with the family and stayed in touch. And now both of them work for me. So.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. I love that story.
Our children will teach us, right? And
Absolutely.
for those that aren't a member of our community, our children will teach you if you allow them to. If you allow them to. Yeah.
That's great.
Wow.
Things can happen, absolutely, for our kids. Well,
Yep.
thank you
Yeah.
guys for raising awareness and doing the work. I hope to see you on November 17th at the gala. Love to have both of you there. You will enjoy it. You'll get to see more of this center. We got some great drone footage we're going to be showing, first time revealed of the center.
Excellent. Be
You get
honored.
to see Dwayne and Drew Cox. We're also honoring our Lieutenant Governor, Eleni Kukonopoulos, and we are honoring Amazon. Amazon has been a big supporter of special needs community across the country, but definitely of the work that we do here in Los Angeles. So
Amazing.
great
That's
chance.
fantastic.
Thank you. Yes, for sure.
Lieutenant Governor.
Sean, do you want to ask Areva the question?
Yes.
Give her one last shot here to.
Yeah, at this
Parting
point in the
words.
show, Areva, we close out with this following question, which is that, our ability to change the world is based in some way, great or small, on our ability or willingness to change ourselves. So if you can, give us one example of a thought or belief that you once believed strongly, but no longer believe to be true.
That I can change everyone that I meet. So in that is acceptance, right? It's learning to accept people for who they are and honor them and celebrate them. And I think as women in particular, we have that nurturing mother thing where we want to change everybody. But I had to learn it's not my job to swoop in and change people. I just have to love people where they are and hope that they love me where I am. So that's been
Excellent.
moment.
Excellent.
Love
Excellent.
That. Well, this has been an amazing conversation, Areva. As always, I'm always inspired by you. Thank you for being here as we wrap this up. Thank you. We always say, again, at this particular time, and Sean mentioned earlier, love and empathy is something that's, always, especially now, be empathetic when you see somebody you may not know their situation. So please be empathetic. Again, be curious before you're making a judgmental statement. Ask questions. Be empathetic to somebody else's situation. And if you look at the world through the lenses of love, the world will be a much better place. So with that, I'm going to throw it to Sean to close us out. And again, Areva, it's great to see you. Sean?
I want to just thank, as always, the women in my life without whom I would not be. That is my amazing mom, Jan, my wonderful wife, Laura. And again, just remember, questions are more powerful than statements. We should remain more childlike and less childish. That is the key to tomorrow and to our future. And wherever you are, hearing us, watching us, we love you.
Thanks, everybody.